It's now my honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Congressman Ed Markey, the NEA-MTA recommended candidate to the United States Senate. Although we won the primary election by a healthy margin, we can't sit back and rest. The race for the final election on June 25th is going to be hard fought, and we need to be in that fight. I want to briefly remind you why MTA and NEA endorsed Congressman Markey for the United States Senate. Ed Markey understands the importance of public schools and colleges in the lives of students and the future of our economy. He knows that our Commonwealth can't be an education leader on the cheap. This is why he's always advocated for strong federal funding for our public schools, especially for Title I funds, for low-income students, IDEA funds for special needs students, and financial aid for college students. After the financial meltdown of 2008, Ed Markey was a key leader in the fight for stimulus funds that saved thousands of educator jobs in Massachusetts, and that includes many people here in this room. When he goes to the U.S. Senate, Ed Markey will continue to fight for adequate funding for our schools and colleges. We can count on that. Congressman Markey also has an excellent record on labor issues. He supports collective bargaining because he understands that teachers' working conditions are student learning conditions. I could present a long list, but I'll just cite a few labor issues that Ed Markey has made a difference on for Massachusetts families. Ed Markey was first endorsed by MTA and NEA 35 years ago when he first ran for the U.S. Congress. Over the past 35 years, he has had an A voting record on NEA issues. He has had a 95% voting record from the AFL-CIO. He has been a vocal supporter of the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage law, extended unemployment benefits, the Employee Free Choice Act, and the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. When he goes to the U.S. Senate, he will continue to put the interests of Main Street ahead of the interests of Wall Street. He is currently the ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee, and he understands that protecting the environment is the true jobs position to take. Kevin Knobloch, president of the Union of Concerned Scientists, has said that Representative Markey is part of an exciting, game-changing leadership in the Congress on climate and energy. When he goes to the U.S. Senate, he will continue to be a leading advocate for clean, green jobs of the future. Ed Markey has been an unwavering supporter of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, understanding that no one should be denied health insurance because of a pre-existing condition, and everyone should have access to health insurance at a rate that they can afford. He has been a leader for consumers in telecommunications. Among other measures, he authored the E-rate law that provides federal funds to connect public schools and libraries to the internet. Not surprisingly, Ed Markey is a strong and consistent supporter of women's rights, including equal pay for equal work and a woman's right to choose. And he was an early and outspoken supporter of the rights of the LGBT community. He has described the Defense of Marriage Act as nothing more than institutionalized discrimination. When he goes to the U.S. Senate, he will continue to support important civil rights for all. So with no further ado, let me introduce you to Congressman Ed Markey, the next United States Senator from the great state of Massachusetts.
Thank you, Paul, and I thank all of you for allowing me to come here today. My name is Ed Markey, and I am running for the United States Senate from the state of Massachusetts. And I want to first begin by thanking you all for what you do to help the lives of every child in the state of Massachusetts. You help to make America's future much brighter. You deserve all of our heartfelt thanks. We need safe, first-rate schools, and we need teachers who are first-rate, and that's what you provide, that you give to us this incredible asset that helps to make us the greatest nation in the history of the world. Mother's Day is tomorrow, and I thought about my mother and how my mother, when I was a boy, would take my two brothers and I, we were all born within a year, me and then the twins right after me, which wasn't a good situation for me. But she used to take us down to the Malden Public Library, to the Children's Reading Hour, when I was 3 years old, when I was 4 years old. And I know that role that it played in helping to introduce me in that public library setting to learning, to reading. And I think about my mother, who was going to be the president of her senior class and the valedictorian, but her mother, my grandmother, died. And so before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, before the New Deal, before all of these great programs that were put on the books by President Roosevelt and a Democratic House and Senate that went all the way through Harry Truman and Jack Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson up through Barack Obama, the social safety net in America was one of the girls is going to have to stay home. So it was an immigrant Irish family, and my grandparents had 5 daughters, and so my mother was the second oldest, so she just had to stay home. And that's just the way it was before Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when she got older, she got Alzheimer's, and she married my father. My father was a milkman for the Hood Milk Company, and my father always said that it was an honor that my mother had married her, and that she was never going to step foot in a nursing home if he could have anything to do with it at age 78, 80, 82, 84, 86, 88, and 90. And she never left our living room in Malden to go to a nursing home. But I would say around the 3rd or 4th year, I decided to just take out a camera and to interview my mother that far deep into her Alzheimer's. And I said to her, Ma, did you ever think about going to college? Because she had never mentioned it, which was kind of funny if you think about it, president of the senior class and, the valedictorian, but she had to, give that up in order to stay home. And she said, no, I never thought about going to college. And then I said, well, Ma, what if you had gone to college? What do you think you might have done? And so she kind of leaned in to the camera and she said, Eddie, I could have been a good teacher, don't you think? So I'm thinking about my mother today, and I'm thinking about all of you and the teachers that you are and the role that you play in shaping each and every one of us, because I know I'm here because of my mother and because of my teachers. It's not a simple formula. It's not a complex formula. It's a very simple formula, what is given to us. And so we have to make sure that we preserve it, that we enhance it, that we put in place the protections that ensure that every child has access to a quality education. My first thought is that the only technology that should be near a child in a school is a computer and not a gun, and we have to make sure that the NRA stands for not relevant anymore in American politics. We have 20 children who died at Sandy Hook Elementary School, but 52 children die each week in the United States from gun violence. 3 Sandy Hook Elementary Schools, So we have to make sure that we put those protections in place, that we ensure that we ban assault weapons and these magazines that attach to them so that we don't wind up with endless, needless repetition of what happened there. And then you come to the sequester. The sequester is just a very fancy word for cuts, mindless cuts. And what sequestration is doing is cutting into Head Start, cutting into Pell Grants, leading to the layoff of of teachers. 190 teachers in Massachusetts will have to be laid off because of sequestration, when we should be investing more in education, not less. And so I voted against sequestration a year and a half ago because I thought that it would ultimately result in 9 consecutive years of cuts in education. 9 consecutive years of cuts. When I was the chairman over telecommunications, because of a visit that I made to the Malden public schools, right over here, my cousin, Mary King, taught mathematics in the Malden public school system. And so she was showing me, with a class of about 25 kids, how she was teaching math off of a computer. This is about 1993. And when the class was done, she said to the kids, how many of you, this is 1993, have computers at home? And about 10% of the kids in Malden raised their hands. And then she said, how many of you would like to have computers at home? And every kid in the class raised their hand. And that was a good lesson to me, because the kids from the wealthier part of my district, they all had the computers at home, and it was creating an unfair advantage between the wealthier and the less wealthy communities in Massachusetts and, of course, across the whole country. So when I was the principal Democratic author of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, my provision created something called the E-rate. And the E-rate is the education rate, and it's $2.2 billion per year. It's about $34 billion so far that's been spent since then. And that's the money that pays for internet access for every classroom and every child in classrooms across the whole country, so that every single child can have access to the technology, because they're just as smart as the kids in the wealthier communities if you give them access to the technology. And that is the first educational technology that has been deployed at the same rate for wealthy children as for poor children in the history of the United States, because of the E-rate program. And I know what a difference it makes in terms of your ability to be able to do your jobs with access to the internet. So I'm running because I want to make sure that we have a more fair society. I'm running because we have to make sure that there is not a sacrifice made to the education of the people within our Commonwealth or across our whole country. Karl Rove is coming. The Koch brothers are coming to Massachusetts over the next 6 weeks. They won the Senate seat in 2010. And they think they're going to come and do it again. And they know that something big is going to happen if they're successful in doing it, because they went to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the founding state of the progressive movement in the United States, and they won in Wisconsin. Then they went to Michigan, and they won in Michigan, the union heartbeat of the nation. And now they're coming to Massachusetts, and they think that they've already had strike 1 in Wisconsin, strike 2 in Michigan, and they're going to have strike 3 in Massachusetts. Do you know what we're going to say to them on election night on June 25th in Massachusetts? No to the Koch brothers, no to Karl Rove, no to these people that want to see a continued rollback in the public services that we provide to the people of our country. In 2001, George Bush and the Republicans, they took over Congress. And they had 2 big tax breaks, mostly tilted towards the wealthy. Then they fought 2 wars and didn't pay for it. And then they set up a casino, or they allowed a casino to be set up on Wall Street with no protections for investors. They took the watchdog off the beat and they put lapdogs in as regulators instead. And our entire economy collapsed. The deficit ballooned. Unemployment went to 10%. And then they start shedding crocodile tears about how terrible this deficit is. And they say, look who's responsible for it. The poor, the sick, the elderly, the disabled, the teachers, the public employees, they're the ones that drive up this federal deficit, huh? Well, let me tell you, we're going to have a big debate if I win on the Senate floor on entitlements. And you know what entitlements I'm going to be raising? I'm going to be raising the $40 billion in tax breaks that the oil industry gets as an entitlement. I'm going to be looking at the $500 billion that multinationals get that send jobs overseas. I'm going to be looking at corporate jet entitlements, which they believe are sacrosanct. Let's have a real debate about entitlements within our country. We have to protect Social Security. We have to protect Medicare. We have to protect people who make contributions to our society and expect very little back except for that which they've contributed. And let me just finish with this. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the union up in Lawrence. And for me, my father is from Lawrence. And about 3 years ago, I went back up to Lawrence. And the reason I went up there is that my father graduated from Lawrence, the vocational program at Lawrence High School. And he was the fourth of 5 children. And the youngest, my Aunt Margie, passed away about 3 years ago. So I went back up to Phillip Street in South Lawrence to ring the doorbell to see who lives there now on Phillip Street in South Lawrence. Who lives where the 5 Markey children grew up? And so the door opened, and out came a Dominican-American family with their children. And the accents were different, but the aspirations clearly the same for that Dominican family as had existed for the Markeys. And so from my perspective, this race is really all about ensuring that those children get everything they need. And I know the teachers in Lawrence want to provide everything that those kids need. And I know that when blame is assessed, that they put the teachers out and say it's their fault. Well, ladies and gentlemen, taking away the collective bargaining rights of teachers is not the solution to a problem that has to be solved. The Markeys were able to make it through the public school system, and the son of someone who graduated from Lawrence High School can run for the United States Senate in Massachusetts. I know there's something right about the public school system in Lawrence that we have to find a solution to, but not at the expense of taking away the collective bargaining rights of the teachers. So from my perspective, this is what the race is about. It's about those kids on the porch right now in Lawrence, and kids on every porch in every city, in every town, all across the United States of America. We have to make sure that the 21st century is more educated, more healthy, more clean, more fair than the 20th century was. We have to make sure that we break down all of the discriminatory barriers that would limit anyone from maximizing their God-given abilities. We have to make sure that we continue the fight that was begun in 1932. And it's our job in this race to make sure that we send that signal all across the United States that we are in this fight to win. And we are not going to lose this Senate seat because we are not going to allow this seat to become a referendum on the second term of Barack Obama. Because if we lose this seat, it is going to be used by the Republicans to take over the United States Senate in 2014, and that is not going to happen in the state of Massachusetts in 2013. We are going to go out and we're going to send a message. We are going to send a message that Massachusetts is special. We're 2% of the population in our country, but we are more than just being the Bay State. We are the brain state. We are a special, special place. We know a woman has a right to choose. We know that a woman should make more than 77 cents on the dollar. We know that we have to pass the anti-discriminatory laws to protect the LGBT community. We know what has to happen to make this country greater in the 21st century. So just about 2 weeks ago, I went over to see where the bomb had gone off on Boylston Street. And it was an incredible scene with a couple of hundred people just standing there and all saying a silent prayer. And I looked directly across the street, and the Boston Public Library is there. And all along Boylston Street is the inscription, 1 block long. And that inscription says, "The Commonwealth requires the education of its people in order to preserve order and liberty." They understood that 200 years ago and 100 years ago. The education of its people is the best protection of order and liberty, while it also ensures that every kid is able to maximize their God-given abilities. So I'm running so that we send the right signal after what happened on Patriots' Day. That we not retreat, but we advance. That we not become discriminatory, but we embrace even more every child, regardless of their race, regardless of their nationality, all across Massachusetts and all across our country. That we invest in them in the same way that there was an investment made in us. And I know that the first and best investment is making sure they get a good teacher and making sure they're in a good school. And I'm going to fight for you every day that you give me the privilege of being your next United States Senator, to partner with Elizabeth Warren to accomplish that goal. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Very optimistic.